Hello and welcome to the Freedom Anarchist News Review. With me tonight I have Andy. Hello, Andy.
Hello again, everyone. Still here.
Just about. Um, and we have a short but vaguely interesting series of events for this evening. Obviously, the big headliner is your party being founded after 4 months of arguments, splits, money grubbing, SWP expulsions. So, what is next for the plucky new party? We have Labour's attacks on refugees, which have had exactly the outcome that everybody predicted and led to people dropping out of the system and onto the streets. Uh, Meanwhile, there's been a big downturn in new homes construction, completely reversing Labour's supposed plan to increase them. And Ofgem has revealed the likely spend on infrastructure upgrades for energy over the next 5 years, with much of the cost being punted to the public, an average of £108 extra per year. But starting with the most entertaining one, we have your party. Andy, have you been watching the whatever that was, whatever those 16 hours were?
Oh dear. We all sort of grew up on singing the little song of those one trot factions sitting in the hall, and if the one trot faction should accidentally brawl, but it's it's as if they've managed to take all the mistakes that the Labour Party has made over the last 40 years and bundled them all up into.
It's
Um,
incredible,
they
genuinely
couldn't
incredible.
even keep it together until they got a name chosen. It's in some ways it's very funny to us hardened old anarchos who've been slagging this off for a long time. On the other hand, in the wider political picture, it's a disaster. Um, it's just if Farage had wrote the script for it, it would be pretty much what's happened, and that's um, so yeah. In many ways it's funny, in others it's completely depressing, and to crown it, I was watching the London news tonight, and Corbyn is appearing in Panto in Islington, to which he should, I believe he is the Wizard of Oslington, and he does not
I,
need a script.
I mean, surely you'd be doing very quick rewrites for political, just to throw. Um, Yeah, no, it's been incredible to watch, and I feel terribly, terribly sorry for all the people who were so enthusiastic early on about your party. I have been seeing, in all fairness, a few people who have said that it's been. Um, uh, there's at least one person who went and was upbeat about the whole process, saying that it was chaotic, but that's kind of what you expect, which is true, I would say. Like if you're gonna try and form a big grassroots group of any kind, you will have a certain degree of chaos. Um, that said, I think the number of avoidable mistakes was really quite incredible. I mean, just it's entirely logical from a party political perspective to say we don't want to have entryism in our organization. And as the party, we don't agree with the prospect of other parties being, able to directly challenge for primacy within our own organizational meetings, etc., etc. Perfectly reasonable position if you are a political party. Um, and it's perfectly reasonable to say the SWP specifically would just pull the rest of the organization into disrepute because of its previous, and therefore we don't want the SWP specifically in your party. Again, perfectly reasonable. I would be actually bang alongside with that as a general policy. Uh, what you don't do is send them all emails whilst they're on the train to the event. And then have to try and pull them all out of the building. A couple of them slip through the net, and then they're up on the podium shrieking down into the crowd. Absolutely bananas. The most incompetent way of stitching up a process I have ever seen. Um, and from people who should know better, like these are Corbyn himself has always been a bit incompetent on this stuff and a bit wishy-washy. Fine. Zara Sultana uh, is clunky as hell with her various attempted putches within the party. Um, and okay, probably not that savvy in how to do these things subtly, but there's a bunch of people, certainly around Corbyn, who should have had lots and lots of experience at preemptively, getting round those kinds of problems before they started. And just the fact that they were unable to do so, I just find mind-boggling. It's the sort of thing which, if anarchists did it, and anarchists are not party political, you know, animals of decades of experience, I'd be like, oh, that was a bit cack-handed of you. Didn't think how that meeting would go. Um,
Yeah, I just wonder about the the origins of this, which seems to have come because of the unexpected kicking out resignations of Sultana and Corbyn. So there wasn't the planning that went into, right, we're going to form a party, then we're going to try and take as many people out of Labour as we can when we go. It wasn't like, I suppose, the SDP back in the 80s, that there was a strategy behind it. It was just, we've been kicked out. What do we do now? And yeah, there is a fundamental dichotomy between the Sultana wing, if you like, and the 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 old Corbynites. That's pretty unresolvable. It just they do have fundamentally different political views that you could fit in a broad-based thing like a Labour Party that wasn't kicking out all the lefties, but um, you can't actually get together in a coherent political program. Um,
yeah,
and the question is how long it can go on. Uh, can it get into the next election to split the lefty vote further than it's already going to be split between Labour and Green?
I was
Um,
very tickled actually.
um,
Sorry. There's a conspiracy theory that's already doing the rounds about your party. Sorry, about the Greens from your party members, which suggested that the sudden surge from the Greens was a conspiracy where Zach Polanski had been put in specifically to disrupt your party's success. Um, and you're just sort of looking at that going, but Zach Polanski joined the Greens 6 years ago, became deputy leader, what, 2020, 2021, maybe 2022? But he became leader before your party had announced that it was going to be a thing, or was starting his campaign for it. And you're just like, this, this smacks to me of um, when you collect all of the weirdest sects of the left together in one place, uh, and half of them, as you say, are kind of on the Sultana wing of we desperately want this to be an open umbrella grassroots enterprise, which allows everybody in and everybody just has the debates and maybe we form policy through this kind of very broad-based politic and the old hands from Corbynism and old and sort of Labour under Corbynism and all this, who want a traditional structured party top down, um, in which you don't allow all of the weirdos to to run things, um, and it just produces this spaghetti of ideas and allows so much room for people who are obviously just loons, political loons, to kind of get their voices heard. And yeah, just complete chaos. And I don't see how, as you say, I don't think it's very resolvable, certainly in the short term. Um, like I can't help but remember the bit which came out where uh, it turned out Diane Abbott had been hit up to join as well, and basically strongly advised Corbyn against doing any of this. She must be sitting at home just being like, "Yep, Told you.
Yeah.
um,
Dear. I mean, if you are completely incompetent and unpopular, um, it's it's very easy to see it's a conspiracy if some charismatic dude comes and takes over a party and seems to have it united. There's got to be a stitch up, hasn't there? That
it's
it
it's
just shows he had it planned years in advance.
it's just absolutely not plausible for the left to produce someone who's actively quite charismatic. It's just not a thing that's on the left's radar, I think, is it? And perfectly understandable to feel that way. If anyone who's ever gone to a big London march and stayed to the speakers at the end, it's not a lot in the way of, you know, engaging tub thumping that goes on at the end of those. Um, but yeah, I think I sort of said last week or week before that the your party is doing a great job of rounding up all of the worst people on the left so that the Greens can have a proper crack at things. Nothing which happened this week disabused me of that as a general idea. And
Yeah.
best of luck, I guess. There have been noises, a couple of little bit of noise about whether anarchists should engage with your party. I understand the reasoning behind it because anything which has a sense of, forward motion, lots of people involved in it. There's a general, particularly if you've got regional groups maybe which have a bit more energy and a bit more sound behavior than the central organized stuff. There's a temptation to kind of want to get involved and see if you can kind of recruit people to your way of thinking and all the rest of it. I personally think it's a bit of hiding into nothing. Um, in the same way as it was really with Corbynism 1.0, which was, to my mind, a much more I had more going for it ultimately. I think the capture of Labour was a genuine mass movement. It had an existing structure in place. It already had the rules which said, no swappies, etc., etc. Um, I struggle to see how a party of that scale and scope, which failed in the ways that it did, would be bettered by your party. Because your party has all of the problems that Labour has, structurally speaking, or worse, just without the internal shenanigans from the right. Um, and it has all the same problems, even if you get to the stage. And, you know, what was I think they had 8,000 people at the event or voting, implying a membership of, I think, 20, like an active membership of about 20,000. Um, which is already a far cry from the 50,000 that signed for um, the subscription, and nowhere near the 200,000 that they had down as kind of vaguely interested. Um, but those are reasonable startup numbers. Um, but those 20,000 are spread all over the country, and they don't have a network or the numbers on the ground to do anything like what Labour does. But even if they got anywhere near getting MPs, getting power, you still have exactly the same problems in terms of policy that Corbyn's Labour had, right? You still have the problem of um, getting out of NATO, which is something which they've got strongly on the books. Um, your interactions with the markets and the general kind of stranglehold that big business has on the economy, and which doesn't have the countervailing pressure of Labour organisation. All of this stuff still exists. I think there's a large wing of the left which looks on groups like your party in a kind of I can imprint whatever I like on this and there are no stakes. Um, so why not kind of thing. Um,
Yep. First as tragedy, then as farce. I believe is the traditional Marxist.
yep.
Yeah, with 101 Corbyn, there was a chance that Labour could have won an election. Your party is never going to win an election. Might not even win a single election. Never mind a general election.
Yeah. it's you know, it'll keep a bunch of lefties occupied for a while, I think is what it boils down to. Whether or not that is a good thing, I'm unconvinced. Um, but then again, I suppose that's not surprising coming from an anarchist, one way or the other. Um, I think as long as they don't start telling me that I am impractical, then fine. Uh, but, moving on from that, so we have the moving back to Labour and the government policy in general. So we have Labour's attacks on refugees, which, according to NACOM, which is a kind of an umbrella group for refugee support networks, um, they are pinning the blame on, as you might expect, near constant government policy changes and the introduction of e-visas, which have been making life much harder for people. Um, and obviously, this stems from the introduction of the hostile environment, the chasing after reform, the obsession with clearing out the hotels, which is again cited as being a direct cause of the sudden rise in street homelessness. Because this applies specifically to refugees who have been acknowledged as refugees. So we're not talking just applying for asylum. People who have been acknowledged to need to stay in Britain. Um, and what the government's basically said is, well, we desperately need the places and we need to kick people out of hotels as quickly as possible. So you're out. You just, as soon as you get that green card to stay, all support is dropped, and you're just out of the building. So they're passed on to these refugee support groups, which, because of the rapid acceleration of the number of people being kicked out, have nowhere to put them, hence an increase in rough sleeping. And we were saying this, ooh, several months ago, whenever the we're going to shut down hotels was first being mentioned, we were saying this was going to happen, right? Um, Completely predictable.
It's yeah, um, tragic, isn't it? It's just absolutely tragic, and this um, the the rhetoric that we've had of that just in the budget of this is a Labour budget that we're going to support people is all a farce. There is no genuine compassion left in anyone. The one thing you can say about the people who quit with your party is that they were pretty much the last people in the Labour Party who cared anything about other than themselves and winning elections, and they've quit. And this is just a classic example of them not really caring at all if they ever cared to start with. Um, um, yeah, the mind boggles at what those poor people are going through, and only going to get worse as winter goes on. Um,
Well, and there's obviously the uh, again the secondary thing that we were talking about that was likely to happen as a result is that whereas you previously had people protesting outside hotels demanding that the hotels be closed, now what we will have is a spike almost certainly in articles in places like the Daily Mail and the Telegraph and the Express and the Times, um, and things from Reform itself and GB News, all bashing on about, oh, well, all of these immigrants are on the streets and chaos is reigning, and you're not safe to walk around the town centre of night because you've got all of these people just hanging around, and none of them will acknowledge that this is a direct result of policies that they have been championing for years. But what it will do is mean that it'll provoke the same people who are currently sticking around outside hotels to instead form paramilitary patrols to start harassing refugees who are sleeping rough. It's already happening. In fact, there is a story on the Guardian in the Guardian today, um, talking about people being harassed outside one of those hotels because where did the refugee themselves know, where were they going to go? They sort of hung around where they kind of knew, and immediately got picked on. Um, there's no, it's just the complete lack of strategy and enough bravery to say to these people, like, none of the policy, all of this bigotry and jingoism that you're pumping out has no sensible solution to it that you're presenting. Like, you can't just say kick people out of the hotels. They don't disappear. They don't just vanish into thin air. Like, this is none of this is sensible. Even on their own terms, it's not sensible. But no one has the bravery to say it. Just the pathetic nature of politics, party politics, is just laid as starkly bare by this kind of stuff as it could possibly be. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
I I suppose from an anarchist perspective, obviously the solidarity is going to be with all of the refugee charities and support networks and solidarity networks that are around, including anti-raise and all this kind of stuff. They are going to be extremely overworked trying to catch up with this spike in people. So support for them is going to be at a premium, I think.
Yeah. We're getting more and more stuff on legal support for immigration raids, of people needing to know their rights, the people, the police and the immigration border force exceeding their powers, and it's very difficult because even if people have actually got through all the barriers and been accepted as refugees, they do not have the social kudos to challenge people in authority in the way that those of us who are white and sound posh and perhaps weren't even born in this country, but they can't tell by looking at you, have that privilege. But yeah, I mean, I was just struck by the old 19th century example of Wormwood Scrubs Prison, which was built by the prisoners who had to live in tents until they built it. Now, that's not a very nice example, but at least way back in the 1860s, I think, um, the authorities at least could put people that they disliked to work to build themselves housing. Even that is beyond the imagination of the current government. As we'll come to, I think, in the next item, is that we desperately need some people who could build houses in this country,
I have no doubt
who
that
are
there's
willing
plenty of
and
people.
would be happy to work if they could get a job doing it.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I should probably note, by the by, is for people who are interested in that kind of thing, there is Anti-Raids Brighton put on an excellent. I did it myself fairly recently. Um, how to set up an anti-raids organization, how to deal with raids, all this kind of stuff. They do workshopping. They walk you through what the various basic rights are. Well worth looking into if you're looking to set up a group. But yes, so to move on to the big downturn in new homes construction, which has completely reversed Labour's supposed plan to increase it. The problem, of course, is that simply getting rid of red tape, which has been the Labour policy thus far, it's not a strategy. It's thought that the figures, most recent figures are unrepresentative, but the problem for the government uh, is that even taking into account that this month is looking particularly bad, the promise building boom is clearly not happening. So the obvious question is why, with the obvious answer being you've left the whole thing to private capital and you're not training anybody up to do anything properly. It's short.
Yeah, um, the, it's strange that when I did my politics degree many years ago, we were all sat there studying the elections of the 50s and 60s, where various governments promised to build more housing than the opposition could build, and it was a major part of every manifesto. Um, And yet we have seen in the last, probably since Thatcher's big housing sell-off in the 80s, the population of the country keeps going up, but the number of houses doesn't. And we now have the situation that, one, there's not enough houses for people already here, and there's more people arriving, and it is possible to make a huge amount of money out of renting uh, houses out, and that actually reduces the useful workforce in the country doing any practical things. So we are developing a society of which you can just have a wealth owning minority living increasingly off rent, which means that there is no actual production or desire to do so, because building the houses would really hit at the property owning class, who can just get by watching their houses go up in value, or if they have had the luxury of buying to rent, living off it and doing nothing constructive.
Yeah. There's also, I think from specifically the anarchist perspective, obviously we can kind of reach back to Colin Ward and to sort of self-build movement and squatting movements and all this kind of stuff, and the way in which uh, the squatting movement obviously was dealt a horrific blow by um, the making it illegal to squat residential homes. So we have vast amounts of unused residential property, which is slowly falling into decay and disrepair and decay. Um, but nobody's allowed to just occupy them and live in them, which in a period of extreme housing shortfalls seems like a crazy policy. It shouldn't be the case that landlords are actively enabled to sit on their unused property um, for years and years in some cases amidst a housing crisis. And the government has the power to just remove this law, which was only introduced, 10 years ago? Um,
2012 LAPSO section 144.
Thank you, 13 years ago. Um, yeah, like it's not that long ago that it was
Mm.
still legal to squat residential buildings, and it wouldn't like you'd have to get around the Daily Mail, blah blah blah, but it wouldn't be impossible now to reintroduce it because there's a huge, I mean, if nothing else, there's a huge moral case for it because you've got a housing crisis. There is housing. It's being held by people who have enough money to have multiple properties. So just take away that extra layer that they've got. Um, there's a lot of pressure that could be put on to do that, I think. Mm. And then the other thing, of course, is the self-build movement was gutted essentially by the growth of uh, extreme levels of red tape in some cases. Like the construction industry is um, constrained to a high degree by red tape, and that is because capitalist companies consistently cut corners wherever they can, and therefore you need to continually, you know, uh, be overbearing with regulation to make sure that they build stuff that doesn't fall down, and that is perfectly understandable. But what it also does is it means that people who are building their own stuff for themselves are caught in this as well, and it makes everything 5 times more difficult, more expensive, which means that you take away the ability for grassroots constructors, self-builds, etc., to happen. Um, and that is a serious issue in as much as, you know, making it so that only major constructors can build stuff does undermine the speed at which you are able to build housing and, even extend housing. Um, and it takes it away from more working class concerns, cooperatives, all that kind of stuff. And these are things which are within legislative possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Rich says, late to the party tonight. Well, yes. Hello, Rich. We may be relatively short tonight, and we just to go on schedule. We'll probably do one more next week, and then break for Christmas, and then back in the new year is probably the most likely one. Moving on to the next story, however, we have Ofgem, which has revealed the likely spend on infrastructure upgrades for energy over the next 5 years is going to be something along the lines of 90 billion quid by 2031, with an initial 28 billion of spending, 64% of which will go to gas networks, and obviously 36% towards high voltage electricity. The cost of this will fall primarily on us, 108 quid extra per year for the privilege of private companies building a bunch of infrastructure for private companies to benefit from. So, as ever, it's privatized profit, socialized risk. This is all set up against Labour removing 150 quid from typical annual bills from April by saying some renewable energy subsidies will be paid for out of taxation instead. So this is, primarily take with one hand, put into the other hand. Yeah, I mean, there is a certain thing, I think, obviously, with the anarchist analysis of saying privatization doesn't necessarily make things worse. It almost certainly does. State ownership doesn't necessarily make things better. Certainly with utilities, there is the so Milton Friedman and co, the neoliberal analysis of state ownership, is an incredibly self-serving one in terms of just shove it all into the private sector and that'll sort it, which is obviously nonsense. We have seen it turn into nonsense over the past 30 years. But part of the criticism, the critique that is not wrong, is that state ownership does not necessarily imply efficiency. And you can quite easily have the state take something over and then run it badly and still have all of the problems with corruption and empire building within state environs and poor deal making with whatever you're purchasing, etc., etc. And this, from an anarchist perspective, I suppose leads to the question of non-hierarchical or decentralized ownership of the means of energy production, something which is very difficult in a situation such as, say, nuclear power, but considerably more likely in, say, solar power or wind power. And it's something which is not really prioritized by government. It's something which is energy companies obviously dismiss out of hand. And it's something which there are grassroots groups which attempted to push it, but not in a very joined up way, I think it's safe to say. And yeah, like I think one of the things which we are getting towards, certainly at the moment, is asking, okay, so why is it that all of this infrastructure that is being built out is continuing to be done with only an eye to centralized power? And obviously, it's because the state likes it that way, right? It gives it more power, more control. But how can we push back against that? What are our strategies and ideas in terms of decentralizing it again? Yeah, do you remember kind of some of the general ideas that have been floated around over the last however long? Transition towns was big for a while.
Well, we're dealing with this situation that neither capitalism nor a liberal democracy can do long-term planning because the profit motive wants return now, and a political party wants to be elected. In the terms of energy, just the simple examples that you have is that can self-organized people do that planning for a long term in advance. And now, if you look at something like solar power, do you want to install that on your house that if you might have to move out of it soon? Or you won't install it on somewhere that you're renting because it's no use to you. If you think you're going to live there for the rest of your life, if you think your children might live there for their lives, then it makes sense to insulate, to provide a wind turbine, to provide solar energy. And that's uh, it is ages since I sat there with the huge pile of Colin Ward books around me to not bothering to read them enough of this sort of stuff. But it's the dynamics of how people think about the future that determines where we've got to, because all of this is the result of decades, in very much like housing, of governments putting it off and going for the cheap monetary solution in the meantime. And um, as with all green issues, um, there are there is a stick and a carrot. The the carrot is people being able to see a positive future if they self-organise. But there is the stick to come with climate change is that things may get so serious that people realise that there has to be a fundamental rethink so we don't end up with these kind of problems again, which climate change being a classic one of global warming has been a known fact since the 1970s. It could have been tackled in time, and it hasn't. And there may be other future crises that have the same thought that will result in a major political rethink that you can't trust those kind of organizations and capitalism in particular that has no long-term future. The other big economist quote that I'll dig out is the John Maynard Keynes, who said, "In the long run, we're all dead." And if you've got that kind of attitude towards society, then you're going to and leave the next generation in the shit.
On Keynes, I like it. Okay, so we've got two. Thank you for it. We've got two stories to round off, including clashes at Generation Deutschland blockades, which is a freedom story written by Josie. Tens of thousands of people have arrived in Gieben, Germany, as part of a united front against the formation of a far-right youth party relaunched by the far-right Alternative for Germany on 29th of November. And for folks who don't know, the AFD had previously had a youth section which was so outrageously far right that it was essentially just a terrorist organization that got closed down. This was their attempt to reform a slightly more sensible one, which also seems to be going incredibly badly, and has sparked a fairly large resistance movement to it. It's nice to see the AFD having any trouble at all in Germany, I feel. And that the anti-fascist movement there has been getting pretty decently organised, with a giant Antifa banner, no less, in defiance of any American influence. Yeah, well done to all who was out there and fighting the good fight. Seems like you had a good night. Um, Sort of thing we could stand to see more of, I think.
Yeah.
And our final story is Hillsborough, police condemned but no justice. This is a piece by Punk Academic, our regular contributor. And it's a very decent analysis piece summarising the events of Hillsborough that is just literally just flagging it. I think it's well worth a read. Um, and I think that is us done in relatively record time, partly because
Yay.
everyone's a bit tired tonight. So on the,
I will say one quick update on the Filton trial.
Oh yes, of course.
We've just got started the defence case today. There should be full reports coming on Real News if you can't find it anywhere else. The only thing I will say to all our happy viewers is, please, I never want to see another court report that says, and then we've got the text where they said, shut down your Signal group and do not talk about this on social media. It
Oh.
really is something we could all do without.
Back to the good old days. Leave your phone in the other room. Just used to be standard at the White Hart. You'd have the tower of phones, and then everyone would go out back. Um, no longer the case, I should say, but used to be. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much, Andy. Much appreciated for general chat and the update. Indeed, thank you everyone for turning out for a relatively light show this week, and we shall see you all next week.